Troy Aikman criticizes referee Clay Martin over controversial calls on Patrick Mahomes. It's tough enough to try and take down Patrick Mahomes when the odds are stacked against you. But throw in a few questionable referee calls, and it might just feel like you're trying to climb Mount Everest blindfolded. That was exactly the situation Houston Texans found themselves in on Saturday during their divisional round clash with the Kansas City Chiefs. The Texans were already up against it trying to slow down Mahomes and the Chiefs' high-powered offense. But the penalty flags seemed to rain down a little too often in their direction. By the time the fourth quarter rolled around, the Chiefs had only been called for 3 penalties, while the Texans had already racked up 8 accepted penalties. It didn't take long for that to catch the eye of ESPN's Troy Aikman, who didn't hold back in his criticism of referee Clay Martin and his crew. Aikman's criticism of the unnecessary roughness call. One call in particular set Aikman off. In the third quarter, a seemingly innocuous hit by Houston's Henry To'oTo'o on Mahomes drew an unnecessary roughness penalty. To'oTo'o's hit didn't look anything like a textbook example of a dangerous play. Yet it was penalized. "Oh, come on," Aikman said, visibly frustrated with the call. "I mean, he's a runner. I could not disagree with that one more. He barely gets hit." Aikman's reaction was one many fans shared. The hit didn't look to be anything more than a routine challenge to Mahomes. But the flag was thrown anyway. Aikman and ESPN rules analyst Russell Yurk agreed that the penalty wasn't justified, with Yurk even pointing out that the 2 Houston defenders had accidentally collided with each other. "The 2 Houston players hit each other," Yurk added. "That should not have been a foul." Clearly, Aikman wasn't convinced that the penalty was necessary. As he went on to say, this was something the league needed to address. It was a rare moment where the former quarterback turned analyst and NFL officiating expert found themselves on the same page. And it certainly wasn't the first time Aikman expressed his frustration with the referees during this game. The roughing the passer call, another head-scratcher. But wait, there's more. If that wasn't enough, Aikman and Yurk also weighed in on a roughing the passer call in the first quarter that went in favor of Mahomes and the Chiefs. The Texans' Will Anderson Jr. made a hit on Mahomes that didn't seem to warrant a penalty, especially since there was no clear contact with Mahomes' head area. Aikman and Yurk both expressed doubts about the necessity of the flag on the play. It looked like that first contact was to the upper chest area. Yurk noted, "I didn't see anything there that supported a foul." "I agree with you, Russell," Aikman chimed in. "From that angle there, I don't see helmet to helmet. That's a big-time penalty." This was the kind of call that gets fans talking. Was it really roughing the passer? Or was it just a run-of-the-mill hit that got penalized because Mahomes is, well, Mahomes? Aikman's and Yurk's assessments of the play suggest that the penalty was a bit of an overreaction. But the Chiefs were handed 15 yards and a fresh set of downs, eventually converting the drive into a field goal to take the lead 6-3 in the first quarter. The fallout. How the penalties affected the game. Of course, when you're on the receiving end of penalties like that, it's hard not to feel the weight of the calls. Houston had already been struggling with special teams issues throughout the game, making every possession precious. With those flags working against them, the Texans' mountain to climb only grew taller. Meanwhile, Mahomes and the Chiefs, who were already dangerous on offense, now had the added benefit of seemingly getting a little help from the officials. While Kansas City would go on to score a touchdown on their next drive after the unnecessary roughness call on To'oTo'o, it wasn't just a matter of the penalties directly affecting the score. These flags had a psychological impact on Houston as well. They knew they had to play perfect football to stay in the game. But with each flag thrown their way, the Texans were forced to dig themselves into a deeper hole. What does this mean for the NFL? Aikman's commentary on the officiating raised an interesting point. Should we expect more consistency from referees, especially when it comes to high-profile players like Mahomes? The league has made a concerted effort to protect quarterbacks. But as Aikman pointed out, some calls feel questionable. There's no doubt that protecting the health and safety of players is a top priority. But when penalties feel like they're being handed out based more on the player than the play, it raises the stakes for everyone involved. Aikman called for the league to address these types of calls in the offseason. And it's a sentiment shared by many fans. While the NFL continues to tweak the rules to better protect players and make the game safer, It's clear that there's still some work to be done when it comes to ensuring that the right calls are being made at the right times. Final thoughts. So, what do we make of all this? Was it a case of poor officiating? Or was the NFL just doing its best to protect its star players? One thing is for sure. The controversy surrounding these calls isn't going away anytime soon. The Texans may have had a rough go with the penalty flags. But the NFL, it seems, has already made its decision. The calls were correct. Whether you agree with the refs or not, Aikman's frustration shows just how contentious these decisions can be. It's going to be a topic of discussion well into the offseason, especially as the league continues to refine its rules and how they're enforced. But one thing's for sure, no matter how you feel about the calls, they'll be remembered for a long time in this playoff run. What do you think? Were the penalties justified, or was it a case of the referees handing the game to the Chiefs? Let us know in the comments. Troy Aikman incensed by Patrick Mahomes' roughing call. DeMeco Ryans says Texans were facing everybody. It's no secret that NFL fans love to complain about the Kansas City Chiefs getting all the calls from officials, especially when the Chiefs keep winning games in ways that leave some scratching their heads. But on Saturday's AFC divisional round game, even those on the broadcast team couldn't hold back their frustration. Troy Aikman, the former NFL quarterback and current ESPN analyst, was absolutely incensed by the roughing the passer call that went against the Houston Texans and benefited the Chiefs. The penalty, which cost the Texans 15 yards, came in the middle of a tense game that saw Kansas City on the way to a 23-14 win, clinching their spot in the AFC Championship game for the 7th consecutive season. The call that set Aikman off, roughing the passer on a barely hit Mahomes. So what exactly went down? Let's set the scene. Patrick Mahomes, who is known for extending plays with his legs, took off running and then slid right before being hit by two Texans defenders. There was barely any contact, and it was clearly a non-late hit. Yet the officials still threw the flag on the Texans for roughing the passer. Aikman was furious, as he clearly voiced his opinion on the broadcast, saying, "Oh, come on." He couldn't have disagreed more with the call, arguing that Mahomes was a runner at the time and the hit barely made contact with him. The play was soft at best, and Aikman wasn't having it. "He's a runner. I could not disagree with that one more, and he barely gets hit." Aikman fumed. That's the second penalty now that's been called against the Texans. And he wasn't the only one upset. ESPN rules analyst Russell Yurk joined in, agreeing with Aikman and adding, "Troy, I agree with you. There's no forcible contact to the head and neck area of him. The two Houston players hit each other and that should not have been a foul. But the damage had already been done." After that controversial penalty, the Chiefs marched down the field, with Mahomes connecting with Travis Kelce for an 11-yard touchdown that extended their lead to 20-12. The Texas side of things, us versus everybody. But the complaints didn't stop with the broadcasters. After the game, Texans head coach DeMeco Ryans was asked about the calls that went against his team. His response was pointed and hinted at a broader frustration. "We knew going into this game. Man, it was us versus everybody," Ryans said in his post-game media conference. "When I say everybody, it's everybody. All the whatever. Everybody. The naysayers. The doubt. Right? Everybody. We had to go against today. With that, knowing going into this game, knowing what we were up against, we can't make the mistakes we made." Clearly, Ryans felt like his team was up against much more than just the Chiefs' high-powered offense. He was implying that the officials were part of that everybody, making it seem as though the Texans were fighting a two-front war, one against a dynastic Chiefs team and another against what they saw as biased officiating. As for Will Anderson Jr., the Texans' defensive end, he didn't mince words when he summed up his experience of the game. "We knew it was going to be us against the refs going into this game," Anderson said bluntly after the loss. "The Chiefs' dynasty and the refs' influence. Now, don't get it twisted, the Kansas City Chiefs are a great team. And their dynasty over the last few seasons speaks for itself. They're led by one of the most talented quarterbacks in NFL history. And Andy Reid has proven himself to be an elite coach. But, even the Chiefs' most loyal fans have to admit that the constant discussion around officiating tends to overshadow the team's actual accomplishments at times." Saturday's game against the Texans wasn't just about Mahomes' heroics or the Chiefs' defensive dominance, which, by the way, included 8 sacks on Texans quarterback C.J. Stroud. The talk after the game was dominated by the penalties, the ones that seemed to continuously go in the Chiefs' favor. From the roughing the passer calls to the questionable unnecessary roughness penalties. The Texans were left feeling like they were in a constant battle not only against Kansas City's powerful offense but also against the referees. And while Kansas City came out on top once again, this game left a sour taste in the mouths of Texans fans and other NFL fans who are sick of the Chiefs' seemingly endless penalty advantages. What does the NFL think about this? The NFL likely doesn't want to see this kind of discussion become the focal point of a game that was otherwise filled with exciting plays. While penalties are part of the game, it's clear that a growing sentiment has emerged that the Chiefs get the benefit of some very questionable calls. And when those calls go against teams as gritty as the Texans, it adds fuel to the fire. The league will probably continue to stand by its officials. But the question remains, is the NFL okay with the Chiefs' games being defined by the controversy surrounding their penalty calls? Fans of other teams, especially those who are not Chiefs supporters, certainly have their doubts. As for the Chiefs, they're marching on to their 7th straight AFC championship, but not without some heavy criticism for the role officiating played in their win. Whether or not this becomes a recurring talking point in future playoff games remains to be seen. But it's clear that the Chiefs are going to have to deal with more than just tough opponents if they want to continue their march to another Super Bowl. Everyone's turning on Patrick Mahomes following egregious penalty. Is it finally too much? Alright, folks, it's happened. When even the commentators start calling out Patrick Mahomes, you know it's officially reached a boiling point. The Kansas City Chiefs quarterback has been at the center of a whirlwind of controversy during the AFC divisional round game against the Houston Texans on Saturday. It seems like every time Mahomes even looks like he's been touched, a flag flies. And, trust me, it wasn't just the Chiefs fans who were grumbling about this. The whole internet had something to say about the penalties. The first incident, a little tickle. A lot of flags. The first questionable moment came in the first quarter when Will Anderson, the Texans defender, was hit with a roughing the passer penalty. Why? Because, apparently, Mahomes got a little tap from Anderson after releasing the ball. It wasn't exactly a violent collision, more like a friendly, "Hey, I see you," tap. But, hey, when Mahomes is in the game, even a light touch is apparently enough to send him flying, straight into a field goal attempt from Harrison Butker. So, in short, a barely noticeable tap led to a free 15 yards and some extra points. You know, the usual for Mahomes. But hey, we move. The second incident, Mahomes slide into drama. But the real drama went down in the third quarter. Mahomes, trying to take off on a run, decided to do what Mahomes does best, create magic. But as he tried to slide to avoid a hit, Henry Toto of the Texans made a tackle that, in the most basic of terms, wasn't really that late. However, it sure looked like Mahomes thought it was. Because, oh boy, he went into full dramatic mode, arms flailing, face scrunched up in agony. And suddenly, we had ourselves a flag for a late hit. And just like that, another free 15 yards. Sure, Mahomes wasn't hit late, but why let that stop him from getting some bonus yards? This extra set of downs would, of course, lead to Travis Kelce's 11-yard touchdown. And suddenly the Chiefs were up by 8. The fans, however, were not pleased. In fact, they were downright fed up. The internet reacts. A serious outcry. Fans of other teams, especially those not sipping the Mahomes Kool-Aid, couldn't help but voice their frustration. They couldn't help but notice that C.J. Stroud, the Texans QB, had been hit late multiple times throughout the game. But the second Mahomes gets touched, a flag and an extra 15 yards come flying in like it's Christmas morning. You can almost hear the internet collectively saying, "Why is Mahomes getting all this VIP treatment?" The reactions were swift and blunt, with Twitter practically exploding. One fan wrote, "CJ Stroud gets tackled to the ground like it's a rugby match. But Mahomes gets a free penalty every time someone breathes near him. What is this? The Mahomes Protection Act. Ouch." The big question. Is it time to call out the refs? Look, We all know Mahomes is one of the best players in NFL history. The guy is already a Super Bowl legend and has an arsenal of crazy passes that leave us all in awe. But there's a fine line between giving the quarterback the benefit of the doubt and creating a scenario where it feels like a player can get a free pass at every slight touch. It's one thing if Mahomes is genuinely being targeted, but it starts to feel like he's benefiting from some seriously questionable officiating when it seems like the refs are constantly ready to flag every little brush of a defender. Are the referees protecting him because of his status as a Super Bowl winner? Or is it just a case of overzealous officiating? Either way, it's starting to become more of a spectacle than a sport. Conclusion: the ref's whistle needs a break. So, where do we go from here? Will this continue? Or are we finally going to see some accountability for these questionable penalties? Mahomes doesn't need any extra help to win games. The guy is already playing at an elite level. At this rate, he's becoming less of a football star and more of a walking penalty magnet. Fans are starting to wonder if Mahomes has somehow become the untouchable QB, where even a gentle breeze towards him triggers a flag. Whatever the case may be, one thing's for sure: it's making the NFL a little less fun for everyone else. Let's just hope the referees start to let the game breathe a bit more, especially when it comes to Mahomes. The guy doesn't need extra penalties. He's already got enough tricks up his sleeve to win without them.